I started cutting the Beatles' hair from
I always believed that the Beatles' hairstyle was a huge part of their popularity back in the early 60s, when they first started to become recognised. Do you want to know how their hair evolved? Then stay tuned and watch the video till the end. Make sure to like the video, hit subscribe and that bell notification as we tackle all things Beatles with new videos every week. Beatlemania might have peaked in the 60s, but the impact the Fab Four made on the culture can still be felt. In music, the Beatles laid down the foundations for modern rock. In fashion, they made the slim cut suit and leather Chelsea boots combination look very cool, among many other things. As for grooming, they coined the Arthur, a textured mop-top haircut that looks just as good now as it did then. And it's all down to that side-swept fringe. The reason this look worked was because it had never been done before. The band actually got the idea for the cut from an art student called Jürgen Vollmer, who they befriended in Hamburg at the start of the 60s. A couple of years later, John Lennon and Paul McCartney met up with Vollmer in Paris and requested the hairstyle, which Vollmer cut right into the middle of his left bank hotel room. The pair brought it back to England and the rest is history. By late 1962, the Beatle haircut was firmly established as an easily recognisable part of the Beatles' joint persona. In the early months of 1963, the band had already gotten used to being referred to as the Four Mop-Tops by the British press. The Beatles' hair changed the world, and Leslie Cavendish is the man who gave them their haircuts. The first time he met a Beatle was Paul McCartney after Jane Asher asked if he could cut her boyfriend's hair in October 1966. After 2 home visits, he cut his hair very short so he could go on safari without being recognised. The press said he was the barber who made the Beatles a skinhead. He later met the other Beatles at the Baker Street and Wingmore Street offices in 1967 and started cutting their hair at Apple. In a recent interview, Cavendish said, "The whole time I was never told to cut their hair in a certain way. I was never told by the Beatles or anyone individually to cut their hair in any particular way," said Cavendish from London. "I cut it as they had it. As the Beatles' hair grew, so did society's, and it all seemed to be part of a revolt against conformity and an awakening of individuality. Long hair marked you as a member of the counterculture in the 60s. Yet, the Beatles had other things on their minds beside their hair," Cavendish said. "They weren't trying to make a bigger statement with their hair, because the Beatles were natural musicians. They cared about making the music," Cavendish said. "They set fashion trends, but they never went out of their way to cause a fashion trend." Cavendish, who worked under Vidal Sassoon, cut the Beatles' hair from 1966 through 1975. It started when he did a nice job on Jane Asher, who recommended Cavendish to her boyfriend Paul McCartney. After that, he worked with John Lennon and George Harrison. Not so much on Ringo Starr, as his wife at the time, Maureen Cox, was a hairstylist herself. There were never any discussions about styling their hair. Just like their music, the hair evolved, but the hair was always trimmed. John's hair wasn't as thick as the others, it needed trimming, otherwise the ends would break off. From Sgt. Pepper's hair was shorter, he had sideburns and started to let it grow longer, Cavendish said in an interview. The classic Beatle mop-top style was growing out by 67. It was first worn by former Beatles bassist Stuart Sutcliffe, and it was given to him by his German girlfriend Astrid Kircher. There are varying accounts of which band member got the forehead covering Beatles haircut next, but many telling of the story have Lennon and McCartney getting the cut in 61 by the shearers of Kircher's friend Jürgen Vollmer while in Paris. Look at the early thing with Ed Sullivan. When they got to the chorus of the song, "She Loves You," they would yell a woo, and they did it in harmony with their hair. They shook their heads side to side, Cavendish said. It got the girls wild. They started screaming and the parents got scared. Cavendish later appeared in the Beatles movie Magical Mystery Tour, and he moved his salon into the basement of the Beatles' own Apple tailoring shop in London. "They were ahead of their time," said Cavendish. The ex-hairstylist of the Beatles was full of praises for the band. They would invest in people with really good ideas who they thought would be worth their while and give them a chance. It was a lovely hippie philosophy. Unfortunately, they got ripped off. They gave away lots of money and a lot of people abused their kindness, but they didn't see it. The bad business decisions included Apple tailoring. They sold clothes by a Dutch group called The Fool, Cavendish said. These were very hip hippies, but every piece of clothing was expensive silks. They used the most expensive material and it cost such a fortune that nobody could afford it. Cavendish clients in the Apple era included the Bee Gees, Keith Moon, Bob Weir, Peter Asher, Graham Nash and more. The Beatles broke up in the 1970s and eventually Cavendish and the Fab Four parted ways. He's been mum for decades about his experiences at the centre of the Beatles universe, but the publication of his new memoir, The Cutting Edge, gives the times and the band a new and unique perspective. "I lived my life the way I saw things. I was a Beatles fan first," said Cavendish, who was 20 when he started cutting the Beatles' hair. "Like everyone else, I loved the records and I would sing along. The day I cut McCartney's hair was the day I won the Beatles lottery. I won the golden ticket. I stayed in that circle, I kept my mouth shut, and I never told the press or anyone about what I had seen. I never asked for an autograph. I was safe and trusted. I thought I would be a one-hit wonder, but I was called back." When asked if he had a favourite Beatle to work with or a favourite song perhaps, Cavendish said, "A favourite? I don't think so, but going over to Paul's house a lot of times became a much more personal experience than cutting the hair of the other two at Apple. I did enjoy George coming to the salon when he came from his house in Surrey to Apple Savile Row via 161 Kings Road. He always wanted to have a chat. We would wash his hair, then blow dry it with his eyes closed and listen to the music I'd like to play, such as Nina Simone, The Doors and Fleetwood Mac. I always liked the Beatles song Things We Said Today, but every time I hear Obla Di Obla Da, I think of the night at Trident when Paul played an early draft of this to me at about 1 AM in the morning. I went home singing the chorus line." A few technical details on the cut. Straight locks were brushed down, hiding any appearance of a natural part to create a clean, combed-over effect, but it swept across the forehead in a slightly shaggier style, fronting the haircut with an effortless-looking fringe. Each of the four embraced it at different levels. McCartney's was thinner and a bit more feathered, whereas Lennon's was full and heavily layered. George Harrison named it Arthur in an interview. No one really knows why. Latterly, Liam and Noel Gallagher both embraced the side-swept haircuts in the early days of Oasis, as did the majority of One Direction circa 2014. A tad too gelled for our taste, but 10 points for trying. As for today, all 7 members of K-pop band BTS are sporting pretty good takes on the style, which shouldn't come as much surprise given that they've literally replicated a set of the Beatles' 1964 debut on US television. The key to pulling off this style is to ask your barber to cut some long layers into your hair, which should ideally have a straight texture and be grown to about 4 inches from the top and across the forehead. After that, ask for the sides to be trimmed back a little and have your sideburns clipped to earlobe level. Paul McCartney's cut especially is a good port of call for this. As for the styling, a comb and matte wax will be your best friends. Using a wide tooth comb, brush all the hair forward and your fringe slightly to the side. Then rub a touch of Uppercuts Deluxe pomade through the fringe and top layer of hair, not too much as you want to show the natural, soft texture of the mop. The pomade is just to hold it in place. Simple, right? It really is. Just make sure your suit is half as slick. There you have it all guys, drop a thumb up in the comment section. Don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons if you've not done that, and follow us on Instagram and Twitter. The handles are in the description box below.